Hey, this is Mike at Fancy Foam Models. Today I am working on a Fenix V2. This is a flat indoor EPP 3D model. I'm wanting to build one for myself to take to indoor flying that's coming up. And this is going to be part one of the build on this. We're going to take care of kind of the horizontal pieces and the lower fuselage. So what I've got here, I've got the nose piece, I've got the lower fuselage, the wing and ailerons, the rear horizontal fuselage, the horizontal stabilizer, and the elevator. Carbon wise, I've got the carbon spar that goes in the wing and the 1mm carbon rod that is used for bracing between the horizontal fuselage and the rest of the pieces. To start with, we're going to be hinging the ailerons and then the elevator. And actually previous to that, we'll glue the wing spar in. I'm going to test fit the wing spar, make sure everything fits right. For glue, I'm using foam tack. Sorry about the lighting. This is what I sell in our online store. Really happy with it. Works really well. I'm going to start by just putting a bead down into the slot where the spar goes. And I like to put a decent amount of glue in here because I'm going to spread it around with the spar so that it sticks really well. On the hinges, I tend to use a little bit less. That gets spread around as well, but on the spar, I definitely want that to hold really well. Now, if there's a bunch of little chunks of EPP down in the slot, you'll want to remove those. You don't want them pushing the spar out or anything like that. So I've got my glue down in the slot there. I'm going to set the spar down in there, and then I'm going to kind of spin the spar so that it spreads the glue around on the spar and around in the slot a little bit. And that's just going to spread that around a little bit. And then for now, I'm going to set that aside on a flat surface. Next, I'll do the hinge on the elevator. Got a little bit of excess glue on my tip. I'm going to wipe that off. And then we're just going to spread a small bead of glue on this one side here. And here, the glue is probably maybe a 1/16 of an inch bead that I'm putting along here. Definitely on hinges, you don't want too much glue. That'll make them stiff. And we don't want that. So I'm going to set this down flat. Push those together, pull them apart a couple times. It'll get a little bit stringy. I'm going to center it so there's about the same size gap on either side, and then I'm just going to take my finger and kind of smear this glue around a little bit, flip this upside down, and kind of wipe the bottom. I want to actually spread that glue out a little bit on either side of the hinge there. That kind of gives a little bit better area for the glue to stick to. It's starting to tack up a little bit now. I could pull it apart if I wanted to, but I'm just wanting to see that I'm wanting to pull on it a little bit and see if there's any area that doesn't have enough glue. And then I can go and add a little more glue in there, but I got it pretty even coat all the way across. There's no gaps really forming when I pull it apart. All right, so that part's done. While I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and glue the horizontal fuselage onto that piece. Again, this is going to get smeared around, so I'm going to use a little more glue here, probably more like a 3/6 or maybe 3/32 or 1/8" bead. So we have a decent amount on there. I'm going to push this together. I'm actually kind of holding it up off the table a little bit because when the glue smushes around, I don't want it to get all over my table. And I'm just kind of rocking and smearing this glue around on the surface. I want all the edges to get coated, and I'm just using the 2 parts to smear the glue around. And it'll start to string up there a little bit. Once it starts to do that, I kind of want to just put it together. I'll wipe the top, kind of wipe the bottom, make sure there's no globs or anything. Push that together a little bit, and then I'm going to set that aside. It goes pretty quick. Now I'm back to the wing. This is tacked up. It's not going to fall out, but if I bend the wing, it's probably not glued enough or dried enough to where it'll stay in. So I'm going to try to be careful, leave this flat so that the spar stays stuck in there. But at this point I can turn it over. Similar to the elevator, I've got the 2 surfaces that will actually do the hinging, here and here. There's a break in the hinge line for this piece here. Now sometimes when this flexes, the bottom edge of this will catch there, and the same on that. So what I like to do is take a little straight edge and a really sharp knife, and I'm just going to trim just a bit of a bevel, just a little sliver off of the leading edge of that and the leading edge of this, and that just gives us a little bit of clearance so that it doesn't hit as it moves. And you need a really sharp knife for that. If it's not practically a brand new blade, then it's going to try to tear the foam instead of just cutting through it. A brand new blade's going to cut through it like butter. Okay, so I've got that trimmed up. The other thing I'm wanting to check, and this varies from airplane to airplane, is because of this angle cut right here, it also can kind of hit as it comes up. Probably not so much out here, but in here it tends to hit a little bit. And so I'll usually cut a little bit of a clearance on that as well. It's a little bit trickier because you don't want to get down into the hinge line. So I'm going to go slow, and I'm going to cut almost back to the hinge. So I've got this piece that's loose here, and then I'm just going to cut the rest of it by hand, and that way I can kind of undercut into this hinge area. And I'm not cutting the top surface at all. This is just clearing away this bottom edge a little bit. And I'll do it on this one as well. And I'm just going to plunge down into the foam, cut forward. That gives me my loose piece. From there, I'm just going to cut back a little bit, match that hinge line, try not to cut the top surface at all. Some people will even take just some sandpaper and kind of sand that, but I like to use my knife. I get these at Ace Hardware. They work awesome. The blades are super, super sharp. You do want to be careful with them, but they cut through the foam really, really nice. All right. Put some glue on the hinge surface here. And if you haven't built one of these or bought one of our kits before, these do come pre-beveled for the hinge. So you don't have to worry about cutting the hinge bevel, but a few little pieces to trim for clearance is normal during the construction. So kind of spread that around a little bit. I'm going to kind of wipe the top a little on both of these. And I'm not trying to remove glue, I'm trying to smear it around. I want all that glue there, but I want to kind of smooth it around on the surface. both of those. And I'm going to do a little bit of a tug and make sure that we've got glue everywhere I want it. That looks good. Make sure all my gaps are all pretty even because we don't want it hitting anywhere. On to the second one. Get rid of any glue on the tip because I don't want a big blob of glue on that hinge anywhere. If you don't want to use your finger, I've used popsicle sticks before. They tend to work pretty nice. And then your fingers don't get so sticky. But this glue, the solvent's fairly mild in it. And it does rub right off your fingers once it tacks up. All right, so I'm going to push that together. Make sure it's adhered good there. Do a little bit of a pull test, make sure there's no weak spots in there. Make sure that I'm centered so my gaps look good. Make sure my spars still pushed in good. It's still a little, I can wiggle it around a little bit, so it's holding good, but I definitely still have to be careful with it. Sometimes if I'm in a hurry and I want to make sure that's not going to pop out or anything, I'll take some hot glue and just do like some little circle dabs of hot glue, maybe 6 places across the spar to help kind of hold that in place. Next thing is the nose piece, and with the aileron servo slot, that's what we'll use to kind of line everything up. Put a nice decent sized bead of glue on there. Lift this up a little bit. And just kind of wiggle this around and smear that glue all over the surface really well until it starts to string up. And if I look at it, it's hard to tell with the white foam, but as it strings, I can see that it's kind of stringing pretty evenly, kind of everywhere across there. I'm gonna wipe my finger across the bottom, make sure there's no blobs sticking down for it to stick to my table with. Press that good, kind of wipe the top, make sure there's no blobs sitting there. Top and bottom both look good. And that part's stuck. Elevator, this is now stuck nice well. Now I want to flex this a little bit. When I first moved this, it was a little bit stiff. Before I get everything, if the horizontal fuselage or the vertical fuselage is glued in, I can't move this as much. I'm wanting to do full travel, completely upside down. I'm wanting to flex this as much as I can before the fuselage gets in the way and kind of loosen that hinge up a little bit, because that should be nice and loose, but yet it's connected all the way across. I'm going to do the same thing on the ailerons. I have less issue with that because the fuselage doesn't get in the way, but on the elevator for sure, you want to make sure that's nice and loose before we get everything all glued up. That's going to glue there. Again, I'll lift that up just a little bit while I'm smearing the glue around. And I'm kind of going back and forth and up and down at the same time to get that glue spread everywhere. Now that I pull it apart, it's stringing up good, pretty evenly. I'm going to wipe the bottoms, make sure there's no blobs. I'm not too worried about this table. It's got a top that you can see is not pretty, but that's glued together and that can set up. One thing you'll notice on this plane is it has a really long tail moment. Dennis Robbins designed this, and he's more of a pattern flyer than freestyle, but he still enjoys flying the freestyle. And so one of the things on the pattern planes, they tend to have longer tails, and he wanted this plane to be very predictable, I guess is a good word to put it. And having that longer tail moment, that's one of the things I really liked about this plane. If you're trying to learn 3D maneuvers, this plane is very predictable. It's not as aggressive, but it's really easy to tell what it's going to do. It's going to be very consistent, especially working on stuff like Harriers, rolling maneuvers. I just really like the way this plane flies. The transitions from horizontal to vertical to back to inverted and the other way, those transitions in pitch are very, very smooth on this plane. And so that's why I really do like flying this plane. It's a very smooth plane to fly. Okay, so we've got all the horizontal pieces glued together. Our hinges are done. These ailerons are glued up nice. Later on, if you find that there's a gap somewhere that didn't glue right, just add a little more glue. Make sure you spread it out, top and bottom. You don't want any blobs in there, but that'll help you out. We'll do a quick dry fit of this fuselage. Make sure everything sits nice, everything looks nice. Now, I'm going to build this on the table, but I'm going to take it away from the table a couple times. One of the things I like to do when I'm gluing this together is hold it vertical, and just so that there's no torque on it or anything like that. I just kind of hold it by the tail with the nose down, and that way, and when I look at it, I want to make sure everything's lined up and kind of when I'm pressing together. As long as you have a flat surface, it's good to work on the surface. I know a lot of people are used to building on flat surfaces if you're used to the old balsa days. The other thing is on this rod here. This is 1,000 millimeters long. I'm going to cut it into 6 equal pieces, and those pieces will kind of zigzag up and down the fuselage. We're trying to create kind of a triangle lattice that will keep the tail from twisting while this thing's flying. So to cut this, I'm going to put it on the edge of my bench, but what I do is I take and I like a little bit heavier knife rather than one of these. This has a finer edge and it'll do it, but it tends to break that edge up faster. A nice box knife like this has a little bit heavier blade on it. But what I do is I set the blade where I want to cut it, and then I roll the carbon and let the blade go across it. I'm not trying to cut through it, I'm trying to score it. And once I get a decent little score, all it should take is a little twist and a bend, and it'll snap the rod. So I'm going to cut this. I've got a 250 mark, little score and a snap. Score and a snap. And I'm not putting a whole lot of pressure on this rod. Now if I'm cutting like a 2 millimeter rod instead of 1 millimeter rod, I have to cut into it quite a bit more. So I'll put a little more pressure on. Again, I'm not trying to cut through it. I'm just trying to score that outside edge. So get that about in half, just under 5 inches. And we'll keep going. And I guess I lied, I'm not doing 6, I'm doing 8. So those are ready. Oop. All right, I'm gonna put glue everywhere that this is gonna touch. I could put it on here, but the way this one is set up is every other slot gets a tab. And so I'm gonna put glue on all the horizontal surface here. Then I'll push them together, smear the glue around before gluing it. This slot here is for the stick mount. I'll put it in later after the horizontal fuselage is all done, when I'm getting, probably right before I put on the upper part of the vertical fuselage. Again, I'm putting a healthy dab of glue on here because I'm wanting to spread it around, and a little bit of extra here doesn't hurt so much. My glue is starting to thicken up a little bit, so I'm having to squeeze pretty hard on this bottle. Normally I don't have to squeeze this hard. And a little bit right here. All right, get that in, and then on these I'll just wiggle this kind of side to side in between where these tabs are to help smear this glue around. Pull this apart. I do want to kind of take a look at it, look and see if I've got enough glue. You could put glue down there and on here, but you're going to have little blobs everywhere there's a tab, so you want to smear that in a little bit. But I think I've got a decent amount of glue in there. I'm going to do that. Here's where I lift it up, kind of hold it by the tail, and I just want to see how it's going to naturally sit. I want to make sure that everything's nice and flat and true. There's a little bit of lean to the fuselage to this way. So as I press this down, I'm going to kind of flex the foam a little bit. And you could use a square here if you want to be perfect about it. No harm in that. I tend to eyeball things, but that's looking good. And at this point, that's pretty much going to hold itself in place. This part here, I hear a lot of comments about people not liking this part. It is a little bit tedious. It is possible to get a twist set in your fuselage. If that happens, you basically have to break these out or cut these out to fix it and get that twist out of your fuselage. So what I like to do is I like to fit everything first, and then I'll glue them once everything's put in place. So what I'm going to do is that I want this rod to go through the fuselage, maybe just to the surface. If it sticks out a little bit, that's okay. I usually try to have it flush, but I want, you know, enough of this rod inside the fuselage where it'll glue well. Same on the horizontal piece. I'm wanting it to go down and stick well. So what I'm doing is I'm just trying to get a feel for where this is going to sit. You know, look at the angle it's going to sit at and go down the fuselage. I'm going to do the horizontal first, and then I'm going to go up through the vertical. If I put my finger on the end of the rod and then just kind of twist the rod a little bit, it'll drill its way down into the foam. I'm going to let it drill all the way through so it's sticking out the other end, and then I can stick it into the vertical piece here. And so I'll put my thumb right on the carbon so it doesn't slide around. I'm going to twist it, and now it's just poked out of this side and it's up it's not sticking out of the bottom, or the top surface, but close to the table here. And so I'm checking that I'm still vertical and the rod's in place. Now these here are going to have to go in at quite a bit more angle because the fuselage is not real wide here. But again, I'm going to try to get a feel for where these are going to stick. And remembering that the rod's going to go this way, so I'm pushing it back a little bit more. And then I'm just going to twist this rod down, get it completely through the fuselage. Now this may not go completely through the fuselage the other way, it's probably going to come out the top, but what I want is maybe 3/8 of an inch of rod sticking up into the foam. So it came up a little bit here. Now it's still sticking out the top. I don't really like where that's sitting, so I'm going to set that back down and I'm going to go further back in the fuselage and drill another hole. So now that's coming out of here and it's not sticking out the bottom anymore. So there's about 3/8 of inch rod in the fuselage here and the fuselage here. As far as the rod being on this side or this side, it doesn't matter. The elevator is going to be hinged on this side, and this push rod is going to come across through here and in between these. The rudder is going to do kind of the same thing on this side, so push rod wise, it doesn't really matter. As far as stiffening everything up, it doesn't really matter. Some people will put bracing on both sides. I found that one side is more than adequate. All right, so we're just going to continue up the fuselage. Drill down through the horizontal. Go all the way through about 3/8 of an inch. So it's sticking out the bottom about 3/8 of an inch, because that's how much I want it to slide back up into the vertical. Push that up through. That's nice there. Okay, check my square again, everything looks good there. Now, it's nice when this one here lines up. I've got a slot here. That's where the landing gear is going to go. It's always nice to tie this in with the landing gear, because the landing gear is also supporting from here to here. And so that's going to work out well. That's going to come fairly close there. And forward of here is really optional. This can torque a little bit with the torque of the prop. I typically will wait on the plane. This plane has a pretty short nose, so in this particular plane I usually don't have an issue. So I'm going to save these for later. If I decide later that I want to do a brace from the horizontal to the vertical, and this has a pretty tall vertical, so I may do that. So for now, I'm going to hold these last two off and wait. As far as gluing these, typically what I'll do is I'll take this tip, and again, we've got a little bit of time to work here. I'm going to take the tip and I'm going to kind of press that down into the foam where that rod is in at, and I'm basically injecting glue into the foam. And so if I move this out a little bit, I'll see that there's glue down in there. Another way to do this is some people will get everything lined up and they'll just use CA. regular. A medium is actually kind of nice because it won't soak through everywhere. So you could do CA and then put a little bit of kicker on it. I like to use the foam tack, it works well. Sometimes I'll want to, let me pull that rod out. Sometimes I'll just put a blob of glue, that one had a bubble in it, just over the hole and then slide it down. And I'm wanting to spin the rod, I'm wanting to get a good coating of glue kind of on that surface there. So I'll put a nice little blob, and then I can just kind of move that around, smear it all over the rod, smear it all over the foam, kind of get it centered where I want it, spread it with my finger a little bit, and then I'll work my way down. We've got enough working time that you can move it if you need to, if you bump something, or you could just do one at a time. Let this one tack up for a while. But what I'll do is, as I work down, I'll go back and make sure that everything is setting up well, and that I'm happy with the results. I don't want to get into a position where I've twisted the fuselage at all, but I'm working on a flat surface here. And these rods actually, they slide in the foam because of the way we did this. They slide in the foam pretty easily, so we're not really putting any pressure on this fuselage at all. And again, I can pick this up, hold it by the tail, and just let gravity hold it, and look and see if I have a twist. Looking down the flat part of the fuselage, you can tell if you see any twist coming down in there. But everything's nice and flat. I'm pretty happy with it. So that's the part one of this video. I'll come back and do another. I'm going to let all this really cure good for probably a good 15-20 minutes. Once this is done, I want it to set up, the spar to be nice and firm, all these connecting rods to be nice and firm before I do anything else. So we'll come back with another part of the video. Thanks for watching.